Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to season 2 of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kayla Smith, CEO of the Hormone Puzzle Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching, creator of the Hormone Puzzle Method, an infertility warrior, 2-time boy mom, and women's health expert. This podcast is for women struggling with infertility, painful periods, terrible PMS, or really just any symptom of hormone imbalance that they are ready to eliminate for good. Tune in weekly as we interview amazing experts in the fields of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get pregnant and eliminate those pesky symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season is packed with even more expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, giving you that jolt of energy that you so desperately need, sending you lots of virtual hugs, and inspiring you to take your fertility into your own hands and make that baby. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now let's get started on your road to transformation. Today's guest is Dr. Loree Johnson. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a coach in private practice with more than 25 years of experience as a clinician, educator, and clinical supervisor. Specializing in women's health and reproductive health, Dr. Loree helps her clients overcome the emotional challenges that come with infertility, including pregnancy loss and emotional trauma. She also helps couples who have become divided by their fertility journey strengthen their connection. Dr. Loree is a clinical fellow of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy and has served on its state and national boards. She's also a member of the American Society of Reproductive Medicine's Mental Health Professionals Group. Let's welcome Dr. Loree to the show. Hey, Dr. Loree, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kayla. It's great to be here.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more about you and how you started working in this field.
Yeah, so I'm a therapist, obviously, and I was, I didn't necessarily start out to be a therapist who specializes in fertility, trauma, and grief. I initially in private practice, I worked with adolescents and families, and it was just an interesting progression around how I just started to see more women who were career driven, who were struggling with infertility, and so that was probably my first introduction to the field. And then my personal experience, I think, really informed my shift in focus professionally. Mm-hmm. I was one of those late bloomers where I got married later in life, never really worried about my own fertility kind of journey. I naively thought that, when it was time or when I was ready, I would be able to have a child or grow my family however I wanted. And seeing women around me who were older, late 30s and even early 40s, just who seemingly were pregnant with no problems. And so when I met my husband, after I finished my degree and, decided, okay, well, we've been married for about 6 months and let's go ahead and try. And I did get pregnant right away. And unfortunately, that was my first experience with pregnancy loss, which was a miscarriage. And that really threw me for a loop because even though like I said, I'd worked with women who had, who were dealing with fertility struggles, it's very different when it's happening to you. Mm. And so I think what I experienced, just the lack of support, the lack of conversation, it just felt like this big secret that I had to carry. And even though I had some initial support therapeutically, because being a therapist, I have my own therapist, but
right.
But yeah, but yeah, it was just a very surreal experience. And And so unfortunately, that wasn't my last experience with pregnancy loss. I've since had 4
Oh,
pregnancy losses,
I'm
and
so sorry.
thank you, thank you. And I've gone through like a year and a half of IVF treatments because, of course, after my second loss, because of my age, it's like, don't do IUI, go straight to IVF. And that didn't necessarily work for me either. And then I had another miraculous pregnancy that resulted in my last loss several years ago. So it's been a journey with
Yeah.
pregnancy loss, grief. It changes you personally, and then it definitely changed how I worked professionally. And I had a lot more empathy and understanding for what women in the community were going through. And I think once I kind of got a little bit further along in my journey, I became much more purposeful about sharing this new kind of vision professionally and wanting to make sure that I kind of gave back and worked, more closely with women in the infertility community.
Such a beautiful story. And I'm so sorry for your losses. I know that
Thank you.
that's tough, but I'm
Yeah.
so glad that we're talking about this because I feel
Yeah.
like not enough people are talking about it and it's very
Right.
common and very real. So thank
Very
you
much so.
for sharing your story.
Thank you.
A lot about how pregnancy loss is almost like a trauma. So talk
Hmm.
to me a little bit about that. How are you seeing that?
Yeah. Yes, we weren't really talking a lot about pregnancy trauma or infertility trauma at that when I was actively going through my losses. But it very much is. And depending on, I think everybody's loss or experiences loss differently. And I think it depends on circumstances. When they happen, there are just other contextual factors that I think really impact how we experience them. But the piece that that I feel like doesn't always get talked about is the physiological changes and the emotional changes
Mm.
that aren't just about stress. It's not just about a stress response where, okay, we might be feeling irritable or, just kind of upset or depressed and anxious, and, in reference to our losses. But, what we also start to see are these periods of avoidance where it's hard to go to doctor's offices where you are, where you need to interact with providers that you associate with your loss. And so there are other elements like that, or how you have to change providers, or you can't go down certain aisles of the store because they're triggering. And you just have this physiological response that's just not about stress, but just kind of veers off into trauma that I think is something that didn't necessarily get framed as well, years ago. But I like that we're starting to talk about that now.
And I wish, there was more training for the doctors because I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
I talk to so many clients that tell me it was almost like they just kind of skirted over it and they didn't really
Yes.
recognize that this was a loss, this was a trauma, this was a very traumatic experience for me and I can't just like
Yeah.
move on. And so I think it's so important that we're talking about it now for sure.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point too, because I think the doctors, even though they deal with it, it's from a very clinical
Hmm.
standpoint. So the language that they use and their tone, it's very disconnected.
Hmm.
And I was really lucky that when I was going through my losses, my doctor actually held my hand,
No.
and she was very compassionate. So there are some that I think really get it, but I think,
Hmm.
that there's still a lot of change that needs to happen that's coming from, from us. We're having these
Right.
conversations and kind of saying,
Right.
hey, this is what we need from you, and this
Right.
will help us feel more comfortable coming back to see you in these spaces that have been very scary for us.
Right, for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah. And yeah, it's not all doctors, definitely not all doctors, but
Yeah.
some I have noticed it is. It's
Yes.
very
Yes.
clinical and it's just
Yes.
like move them in, move them out.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I know my doctor's
Mm,
kind of the anomaly in that. So I
yes.
always like to talk about it because they do exist. The
Yes.
unicorns are out there.
Right, right. And I would say if your doctor is not like that, then find one who is because they are.
Yes.
They're out there. Just like with any profession, there's good. And not to say that those doctors are bad, they have
Right.
a different way of dealing with it. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you talk about, kind of trying to handle this with grace and with,
Hmm.
kind of walking this journey with grace.
Hmm.
And so how do you
Hmm.
suggest we do that?
With minimal expectations, but with good intentions. And what
I
I
love
mean
that.
by that, yeah, because gracefulness, I think when you're grieving, it's not pretty.
Mm,
Um, it doesn't feel pretty, and you have these really intense feelings that you don't know what to do with. You're feeling angry at pregnant people or people who have their babies and are growing their families, and you just start to feel kind of mean. And so having grace for oneself really means showing yourself some compassion that you will show others. And
mm,
sometimes it's easier to think about how we would, show other people or extend that grace to someone else before extending it to ourselves. But it's so important because we deserve it. We deserve it.
mm.
And so I think once you allow space for all of those seemingly ugly parts that aren't necessarily just ugly, but I think they just need love. And so it just allows us to lean into the discomfort and I think really grow and befriend that grief in a very interesting way. So it doesn't kind of take over. It's there and it's in
Mhm.
perspective and you know how to manage it.
Exactly. And I feel like, too, and you might agree with this or not, but I don't feel like we give ourselves enough grace. We
Mm-mm.
just talked, this is trauma. So give yourself that
Yes.
time to grieve. You deserve
Yes.
that.
Yes. And like you said, giving yourself time to grieve, because I find that when we don't, that actually can intensify our emotional process later.
Mm,
It makes the experience worse later on. And I've seen it happen with my clients. And unfortunately, I kind of experienced it myself. And I think when you're going through treatments, you just, the physical nature of it's like you have to stay focused on, what those treatments require of you. And
mhm.
it doesn't always give you that emotional space. So yeah, it's like, be gentle, be
Right.
gentle.
Yes, be gentle. And I love what you said too about, you went and talked to your friend this way, so don't talk to yourself this way. Be gentle with
Exactly.
yourself and show yourself
Yes.
love.
Yes. Yes. Put that bat down, about
Right.
how you think you should be handling it.
Yes, exactly. And so do you have any tactical tips, maybe 3 things that our listeners can maybe implement if they're going through a trauma, they've had a loss recently or even in the past? Like, what would you say would be a few things that they could focus on?
I would say, first of all, give yourself some time, because there is such an urgency when you experience your loss. You just don't want to deal with it. You just don't. And I think learning how to lean into that process is the key, and recognizing that it's your grief, your journey. And I've had multiple women who are in the community, a lot have been in the community a lot longer with, than me, share that with me. And I've held on to that and shared that with others. Every time I felt like, oh, I've got to hurry up and get through this feeling, they're like, you can't. You
Right.
just can't. And just because you can't doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. So your grief journey is going to look like, or your trauma journey is going to look like what it needs to right now. And it could take weeks, it could take months. But that doesn't mean that you're not doing the best that you can.
Mhm.
Also, seeking out support. So I talked
Right.
with women who were, who had gone through pregnancy loss or were going through, other kind of infertility related trauma. That was helpful. So, having a support system.
Mhm.
My therapist, I had a therapist, I had a support group. I even worked
Mhm.
with a coach as well. So I
Mhm.
believed in having a team of people, of supportive people around me. And that was nice to have a village hold space for me. and
Mhm.
and and also the other piece that was helpful was having some sort of routine, which
Mhm.
I know is hard when you are trying to, when your goal is really about growing your family, and here you've experienced this really intense loss. But trying to find a sense of routine that is outside of this identity related to trauma and grief.
Mhm.
So and it's not just about going to work, or, it's really about trying to engage as much as possible with realistic expectations, with hobbies that can bring you some joy, or at least give you a reprieve from the intense emotion that you might be swimming in.
I love all of those suggestions, and I recommend that a lot with surround yourself with a great team. I always talk about
Yes.
you need your therapist, you need your coach, you need your doctor, you need your support group, your support system.
Yes.
And so all of
Yes.
those pieces are so very important to your
Mm-hmm.
fertility journey, to your grieving journey. So I love
Mm-hmm.
that you say that. And experiencing joy. I mean, that's so important. And I know it's so hard to do when you are in the
It
throes
is.
of it. But
Yes.
I think going back to the things we said before, give yourself some grace and some time. And when you're ready, start to find where can I experience some joy and kind of, be on the other side of this and be a better and more
Yes.
happy person. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
giving yourself permission to have joy, because sometimes we
Mm,
think that because we've had this really intense loss or trauma that we have to be sad all the time, that we don't deserve to laugh. But it's like,
mm,
no, watch that silly movie if it gives you,
right.
some reprieve. Go on that trip,
Mm,
spend time, doing something fun. Go horseback riding. Whatever.
right.
But you give yourself permission to do those things.
I love that. You deserve that.
Hmm.
And doing
Yes.
those things will help you to make that oxytocin, which we all know is our love
Yeah.
hormone, which will
Hmm.
help us to push those stress hormones down and raise that oxytocin. So I
Yes.
love that. All great,
Hmm.
great tactical suggestions for kind of walking through this with grace.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a short break to hear a word from our
Okay.
sponsors, and we will be back in just a second. And when we come back, we're going to dive into more practical tips. We're going to talk about self-care. We're going to talk about the mind-body connection. So we'll be back in
Hmm.
1 second. Hey y'all, it's Coach Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back in just a minute, but first, a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the Hormone P.U.Z.L.E Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching. Whether you're struggling to get pregnant with pesky hormone symptoms, or you're working to build a career in the fertility and women's health space, we have you covered. Visit our website at www.coachkayla.com to learn more on how we can help you. Text the keyword fertility to 615-257-8855 for your free fertility meal plan. Thank you guys for taking a break with us. We are back with Dr. Loree. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about self-care. How
Mm.
important is self-care throughout this journey, and especially if you've experienced a trauma or a loss?
Hmm. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, self-care is about a 20. And
Right.
it is, I know we talk so much about it, and we talk so much about it because it really is part of the foundation. And
Mm,
for me, self-care entails, not just eating right, drinking water, nourishing your body, and getting enough sleep or exercising. I also like to think about self-care in terms of how do we manage our emotional energy, our mental
mm,
energy, and striking this delicate balance between how much energy are we expending towards others, how much are we expending towards managing, our own struggles that we're going through,
mm,
and also how much we are taking in and rejuvenating. And so, and I think that we do a good job of recognizing, okay, how do we give to others, and and how much mental space am I thinking about my trauma or what have you. But it's hard to think about when you feel replenished, and so that's what I challenge my clients to think about. And and I would really invite your readers to think about too. What activities or what relationships or experiences help you, like leave you feeling fulfilled, like boosted
mm.
up. And so when you think about self-care, it's like, I want you doing more of that, doing as
Mhm.
much of that as you can. So yes, I think that's what self-care means to me.
Yeah, I love that. And you deserve it. Our listeners, they deserve to feel rejuvenated, to feel
Yes.
filled up. And so what does that
Yes.
look like to you? It's,
Hmm.
I'm asking my listeners, like, think about that. What does that look like to you? What is self-care
Yes.
to you, and what's going to fill you up?
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. And and because I think it's just so easy to get lost in social media or, just kind of playing around on the computer, just in thinking, well, I'm not really having to interact with people, or, this is kind of my alone time to zone out. But is it really zoning out?
Right.
Is it really filling you up in the way that you need to be? And so
Mm.
I'm glad that you're asking people that question too.
Yes, I love it. And I recommend doing, I call it a nourishment menu, where they put some
Mm.
self-care items on a list, that
Mm-hmm.
things that fill them up that they might not think about when they're in the thick of it. And they can just look at this list and be like, oh yeah, I want to go horseback riding today. I completely forgot that
Yes.
I love that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I like what you just said too, because it's like when you write things down, it makes it easier to, to access, because sometimes when we're in periods of stress, we don't have access to a lot of, kind of memories. It can make it actually more difficult to recall information. So if we have them written down, it takes a little bit of the thought process out, and
Right.
easier to think about, all right, I need nourishment. What did I write down when I was feeling a little bit more calm, or what
Right.
have you? It's like, okay, that makes sense. So yes, I love it. I'm right there with you.
Yes, I love that. And talk to me a little more about, I love telling my clients, let's tap into our feminine energy. I feel a lot of the
Mm.
fertility space is very masculine. It's very like, what can I
Hmm.
do? Like, do, go, 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 do, do, do. So
Yes,
do you talk about that
yes.
at all, feminine energy?
I love that. I might not use the language around feminine energy, but I feel like I do in a sense, subconsciously, because I talk a lot about grace and slowing things down and being very gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And I do talk about like, how do we nurture ourselves? And so, and I think nurturing can be, nurturing looks very differently when, it's more kind of from a feminine perspective versus a masculine perspective. But yeah, I love that idea of feminine energy, and how you might use that.
Yeah, and just,
Hmm.
allowing yourself to just be. I think it's all the things that
Hmm.
we've talked about here today, giving yourself grace and doing things
Hmm.
that you love and doing things that
Hmm.
promote your oxytocin. And so all of that's very feminine, of just like, how can I just be and like tune within? So I love that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm,
I love that. I love that word, tune within, or being attuned,
hmm
and being attuned to yourself, and really relearning how to do that when treatments or these negative experiences can try to take you away from yourself. So,
hmm
yeah, yeah.
I
And then
love
there's that
it.
intentionality around, just bringing the focus back.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
sure. So let's talk about that mind-body connection. This kind of ties
Mm-hmm.
in with that. So how important, I'm a true believer in like everything happens in the mind, and it's, that
Mm-hmm.
mind-body connection when you are in this trauma and when you're experiencing loss, sometimes you can kind of get stuck there. And so those
Mm-hmm.
negative thoughts create the experience and all of that. So talk to
Mm-hmm.
me a little more about that. So what's your thoughts on the mind-body connection?
Yes. So one of the things that I really appreciated, and I think about some of the trauma work that I do, is that, we do recognize, that how the body really keeps the score, the body
Mm,
knows. And, so yes, there's a very intense connection between, what information, our minds are processing, and the experiences that our bodies are
mm,
experiencing too. And the power of which, like when that connection has been severed or is a little bit complicated, because I think that's where we start to see or continue to see some of those traumatic reactions that people
mm,
might not be fully aware of. And so, that's where the mindfulness practices kind of come in, or, in
mhm,
addition to some of the deeper level kind of trauma work that we can, kind of do through these, kind of trauma therapies and things like that. But I do believe that our bodies know. Our
mhm.
bodies are listening to, how we talk to ourselves, and it's connecting to what thoughts we have in our minds and what meaning we're making of that. And so I think it can resonate, just like when points of tension, or in terms of like how we're sleeping or appetite, and so yes, our bodies are very tuned in. It's I think we get socialized, or just we just kind of get disconnected from it,
Right.
through some of these experiences, and which is why we're doing what we do to kind of help others stay as connected as possible.
For sure. Yes, I
Hmm.
love that. So
Hmm.
let's talk a little bit more about your partner and how, I feel like a lot of times too, we as women, we feel like, we experience the loss. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
this is our trauma, our issue, but it's, it takes
Hmm.
two to make a baby. And so how can the
Yes.
partner kind of be involved in this and be supportive through this journey that we're on?
I think that our partners are, can be our best allies in going through this. I think the one challenge is recognizing that our partners may grieve differently or might
Mhm.
handle these struggles differently. And we can sometimes want our partner's process to look like ours. And
Mhm.
even though intellectually we know that that's not always the case or shouldn't be the case, and they need to have their space to process however they do, and we need the same. It's still hard when you're navigating it.
Mhm.
And I know that when, we were going through multiple losses, and I'm just really emotional, and then my husband wasn't. And then I was getting kind of angry, like, why am I
Right.
the only one that's kind of expressing this? And it's like,
Right.
but then at the same time, what starts to happen in these dyads, and this dynamic is, it's hard for both partners to be emotional at the same time. And I've
Mhm.
had, and even though I knew this as a therapist, again, it's sometimes different when it's your own
Right.
experience. And that's what I help my clients recognize too, is that when you're in it, it's hard to hold on to the fact that,
Mhm.
these differences can exist. And so it's continuing to have that dialogue around, well, this is what I need, and this is what's going on for me, what's going on for you. And so you get a chance and get more information into the window of what's going on for your partner, and staying engaged that way. And that way, I think it helps you keep, stay as connected as possible in a journey that unfortunately it can tear, couples apart.
For sure. And I love what you said, keep the lines of communication open, talk to your
Hmm.
partner, tell
Hmm.
them what you need and have them tell you what they need because
Exactly.
none of us are mind readers. So unless we
No.
talk, we're not going to
Right.
know.
Exactly. And even if you've been together for 10 years and you're like, my partner should know, it's like, be
Right.
careful about shitting on yourselves.
Right.
You know, we're-
I love
please
that.
don't,
So funny.
please don't shit on yourself,
Right.
because you know what, this is communication, and
Mhm.
we experience and we hear information differently when we're, experiencing stress. And that's
Mhm.
just a proven fact. But again, we have this idea that, well, my partner should know me, and we've had this conversation or what have you, but what are the circumstances? Is your partner stressed as well? Because when we're stressed, again, we can't recall information, and we don't hear everything the way that we might need to either. So, it could be like a game of telephone too, where
Right.
information gets lost. So
Yep.
it's hard to account for that, but it's like remembering that you all are on the same team. You are on
Exactly.
the same team.
Yeah.
And part of having a team is knowing that each of you has different strengths, and you bring different things to the table. So,
Mhm.
you know, and honoring that as much as you can.
For sure, for
Hmm.
sure. And so let's talk a little more about the men that listen to this show. There's not as many
Hmm.
as women, but we do have some
Okay.
men that listen. We have some
Hmm.
couples that listen. So,
Nice.
I feel like like we talked, men and women, they experience grief and trauma differently. So do you have any tips for the men? What are some practical ways that they can process this trauma? Some ways that they can maybe support their partner better?
I think what I see for the men is, immediately going to support their partners, and I think that's such a loving gesture.
Mhm.
And I think what you're picking up on and noticing too is that sometimes, again, when you're focusing on others, you're not always focusing on yourself.
Mhm.
And so it's giving yourself permission to check in with yourself about, wow, what do I need right now? And
Mhm.
how do I feel safe? How can I feel safe in sharing, my sadness with my partner? And so what that might look like, and is just part of those conversations, or how we keep the lines of communication open, where it's not just the women sharing what they need from their partners, but maybe the male partners sharing what they need from their spouses as
Mhm.
well, because I think it's just easy to get overlooked, for them to get overlooked. And so it's like really prioritizing those check-ins with themselves.
Mm-hmm. I know. And I feel too, a lot of times men think that they should just get over it. Like, we need to be
Yeah.
strong. We're men. We need to protect our
Hmm.
partners. But it's
Hmm.
okay for, this is a trauma for the man too. So it's not
It
just the
really is.
women. So
It
it
is.
goes both ways. Mm.
It really does. And I'm seeing more men talk about it openly as a trauma and leading, just leaning into their sadness and discomfort. But yeah, there's still more of that, those ideals about, I've got to be there for my partner. And I know my husband said that to me when I was in the throes of things, and it's like, whoa, you know what? And so I actually made a point to be more intentional about checking in with him, knowing that he might not be as verbal or as forthright about sharing his feelings, but I would just kind of say, hey, how is this landing for you? And that would provide another opening, to as a reminder for him, but also letting him know that I'm interested in hearing what he has to say, and not necessarily expecting him to just be, so vocal and open about it, though, because I am.
Right,
So
right.
it's another
I love,
avenue. Hmm.
I love that.
Hmm.
Oh, awesome. So tell people more about you. How can they work with you? Where can they find you? If you have any programs you want to talk about.
Yes. So right now I'm actually developing a course for people who are managing infertility, stress, and trauma. And it really evolved over time, because I know that there are lots of programs that are focused on, maybe helping people get pregnant. And it's a beautiful, I think, kind of service that's definitely needed. And what I was just seeing too is that there's sometimes people that really need to take a break and restock, kind of take stock of their journey and how it's impacting them, and really, doing the emotional work to be ready for either treatment or moving forward with adoption or whatever they decide. So it's really about finding hope in the next chapter, trying to get unstuck from infertility stress, and so that's what I'm working on right now, and that's going to be launching in a few weeks. But your readers, or excuse me, listeners, can find me online. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Loree, DrLoree Johnson. I'm also on Facebook at Dr. Loree Johnson, and you can also consult my website at drloreejohnson.com. So I'm all over the web and
I love it.
looking. Yeah, so just really, want to make myself available.
Yeah, perfect. And that program will be on your website once it launches. Is that
Yes,
how
it
they
will
can
be.
find it? Perfect.
Yes,
I love
yes.
it. Oh, well, Dr. Loree, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Thank you for having me. I think the one thing I would just like to say, and it's just become my little battle cry / motto, is, your struggles or your fertility struggles don't define you. How you handle them does. And so just a nice little, reminder about you're doing your work, give yourself a big pat on the back, and know that, the fact that you're doing the work is what's the most important, I think.
Yes, I love that. What a great saying. And there's one thing that I forgot to mention is you have a little freebie on your website too, your 6-step
Yes,
guide. So tell us about
I
that.
Yes, I do. Thank you for that reminder,
Yeah.
because it's really, just for individuals and couples to think about just getting back to the basics, the basics of self-care. And I tried to figure out a way to condense all of, like what we've kind of talked about and what self-care means, individually, as well as, as for your relationship. But it's really about taking care of yourself, as you go along this journey. So that's definitely one freebie that I have. And I actually have a second one too, just through Instagram, and it's mainly around grief. So if grief is really what you're identifying with right now, I do have a grief guide to kind of help you understand where you are in your process, and just some steps to kind of help organize you moving forward.
I love that. Such great
Yeah.
freebies. Definitely. We'll put all that in the show notes so people know where to find them really easily. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you. My pleasure. My
Yeah.
pleasure.
And again, thank you so much for being here. It's been an honor to talk to you, so I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been really great chatting with you, and please take good care, everybody.
Yes. Thank you guys for listening. Until next time on the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Bye for now. Hey, hang on just 1 second before you go. I want to make sure that you are aware of all of the amazing free resources that I have for you on my website at CoachKayla.com. From a fertility meal plan, a cycle syncing quick start guide, a holistic healing cookbook, as well as master classes, blog posts by me and some amazing experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition. So many wonderful resources that will help you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of infertility, but there just wasn't. And so that's why I decided to create all of this for you. So make sure that you go and check it out and you take advantage of this plethora of support that I have provided for you. And spoiler alert, these were some of the same tricks and the same foods that I used to get myself pregnant, not once, but twice, even after my doctors said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. So make sure you take advantage of that. And I cannot wait for you to be my next success story. So thanks, love. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in today to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Check out the show notes for today's episode at CoachKayla.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.